On debate, Senator Coyle.
Honourable collègues, we meet today in the Senate of Canada on the unceded lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We have before us a bill at second reading, Bill C-228, which is fundamentally about fairness, about justice, and about accountability for hardworking Canadians, their families, and their communities. It's a bill about income security, financial security for a significant number of Canadian seniors, and it's a bill about parliamentary oversight and the prevention of further pension erosion and vulnerabilities in our country. It's a bill about my friends and neighbours and yours, and it's a bill that is unfortunately too late for my friends Anne and Peter. I do not intend to speak for long, but rather to encourage us to send this bill with its important pension protection objective to committee for a thorough and thoughtful study. While some colleagues in the other place had originally asked for the bill to be fast-tracked and move quickly to royal assent, I would urge our Senate committee studying the bill to do so with great care and attention, as the last thing we would want is to cause unintended negative consequences to people paying into defined benefit pension plans or those reliant on payments from them. And of course, as Senator Youssef has said, we would not want the consequences of not finding a way to protect our pensioners. Colleagues, we have heard about the previous bills with similar intentions, Bill C-253, C-405, C-259, C-225. We've heard that the House of Commons sponsor of this common public bill, the Member of Parliament for Sarnia-Lambton, Ms. Marilyn Gladue, intends this bill to accomplish three things. The first two focused on ensuring the health of defined benefit pension plans, and the last focused on fairness and priority being given to workers and pensioners in the case of bankruptcy of employer companies. First, as you've heard, it will require an annual report on solvency of pension plans to be tabled for greater transparency and oversight. It would create a mechanism to transfer funds into a pension fund to restore it to solvency or to ensure the insolvent portion until the funds could be restored. And thirdly, in the case of bankruptcy, pensions would be paid out to retirees ahead of large creditors and ahead of bonuses to executives. Given the nature of these three key elements, changes are therefore required to the Pension Benefit Standards Act, 1985, the Companies Creditors Arrangement Act, and the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act. Colleagues, we've heard from our colleague Senators Well, Youssef, and Down about the many devastated and rightfully aggrieved pensioners from Nortel, Sears, Co-op Atlantic, and others. Debate in the other place also cited Eaton's, Cliffs Natural Resources, and General Chemical. I mentioned earlier that this is a bill that is unfortunately too late for my friends Anne and Peter. My friend Anne and I are very similar in some ways. She's much better looking, but we were both born in 1954. We both come from families of 7 children. We both have children and grandchildren we cherish. We both live in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. We were the first 2 women vice presidents at St. Francis Xavier University. We've enjoyed satisfying careers, largely working in the not-for-profit sector, where defined benefit pensions were almost non-existent. Unlike mine, Anne's professional career was cut short by severe health problems and accidents. And although she remains active and productive as possible, writing and creating art while she is able, Anne experiences a lot of limitations in our ableist world. Identifying as a person with disabilities, Anne cannot drive anymore. She relies on a wheelchair to get around, and her severe health and pain management issues can be very consuming and expensive. And I'll underline expensive. Anne's husband, Peter, is older than she is. He also has cherished children and grandchildren. Peter had a very active and productive career, in his case, as a professional forester. Peter worked for Stora Enso, a Swedish forest products company in Port Hawkesbury, Cape Breton, for 27 years. He was also a very skilled volunteer designer and builder of many of the beautiful nature trails in our area. Unfortunately, fairly early into his retirement, Peter fell and broke a hip, and he developed dementia, which ultimately caused him to require specialized care in a long-term care home in our town. Like many Canadians, Anne and Peter worked hard. They saved for their retirement and were disciplined in trying to pay off their mortgage. For 27 years, Peter paid into his company pension plan, along with his co-workers. Stora was sold to American company NewPage in 2007. Unfortunately, the case of Peter and his fellow Stora and NewPage colleagues is yet another example of a company, NewPage, declaring bankruptcy in 2011, and its workers and pensioners left holding the bag. NewPage was ultimately sold to Pacific West Commercial Corporation in 2012, which of course wanted nothing to do with pension plan liabilities. The mill now operates as Port Hawkesbury Paper. As a result, Peter's pension income after 27 years of service and his deferred wages being contributed to the pension plan, which at the time wasn't that high in the first place, that pension was cut by almost 1/3, leaving him with a very basic level of pension income, close, I would say around, very close to the equivalent of the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, and we know what that is. Not the amount that he and Anne were counting on when they were planning their retirement, and certainly not what they need given their multiple and cascading health problems. Anne believes the impact of the stress and trauma they have experienced due to the shock of the bankruptcy and the resultant financial insecurity has also exacerbated their many health problems. They didn't lose their house, not at first anyway, although many others did. But they did have to ultimately sell it to compensate for income lost and in order to support their health care and other costs of living, which we know are only going up. Anne tells me now that, however difficult it will be, she's looking into somehow finding paid employment. In a conversation with Anne this morning, she said Peter paid thousands and thousands of dollars of his wages into his pension, and that it was his money and the money of his colleagues that went to pay New York lawyers, creditors, and shareholders. She also acknowledged that although losing 1/3 of Peter's pension has been extremely devastating for them, that many forestry workers were hit with deeper cuts, deeper than that more than 30%, because their pension funds were in even worse shape. Colleagues, I tell you the story of Anne and Peter, a story of vulnerable seniors with severe health issues facing a future of financial insecurity, because this bill, Bill C-228, is about people like them and preventing this kind of injustice from happening again and again to Canadians. As I said, unfortunately, this law comes too late for Peter and Anne and the other Stora NewPage pensioners. Colleagues, in 2012, the year after NewPage declared bankruptcy, the Superintendent of Pensions indicated that only 43% of the then 131,439 Nova Scotians enrolled in defined benefit pension plans had fully funded plans at that moment. Colleagues, we know there are many people across Canada who are today vulnerable to similar pension losses. Honourable colleagues, it's time to bring these serious pension vulnerability issues out of the shadows and into the light, and to find effective ways to protect our valued seniors. Honourable colleagues, let's send Bill C-228 to committee. Let's ensure justice, let's ensure fairness, accountability, and dignity for Canadian seniors. And as Chris Lewis, Member of Parliament for Essex, said in his second reading speech on Bill C-228 in the other place, it's always a good time to do the right thing. And I would add, it's frankly high time to do the right thing. Thank you. Walalio. Merci.